Mark arrived home earlier than usual, the day having been cut short by an unexpected power outage at the office. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by an eerie silence, broken only by muffled sounds coming from the bedroom upstairs. He paused, his heart beginning to race. These were not the usual sounds of a peaceful afternoon. Something was off. He moved quietly, his footsteps barely audible on the hardwood floor. The closer he got to the bedroom, the clearer the sounds became. Soft murmurs, the rustle of sheets, and then a giggle that wasn't his wife's. Emily was home, but she wasn't alone. His mind raced, trying to deny the obvious, but his gut knew the truth. He pushed open the bedroom door with a force that made it slam against the wall. Emily and a man he recognized from her office, Tom, sprang apart, their faces masks of shock and guilt. Mark stood in the doorway, fists clenched, trying to contain the fury boiling inside him. "Mark, I can explain," Emily stammered, pulling the sheets up to cover herself. "Explain!" Mark's voice was low, trembling with barely controlled rage. "Explain what, Emily? That you're having an affair with Tom? In our bed?" Tom, who had been trying to gather his clothes, looked up, his face pale. "Mark, listen, man." "Shut up," Mark interrupted, stepping forward. "Just shut up." Mark's eyes locked on Tom, who tried to back away but was cornered. Mark's rage found its outlet, and he grabbed Tom by the collar, lifting him off the bed. "You come into my house, my bed, and you think you can just walk away?" Tom struggled, his eyes wide with fear. "Mark, please, let's talk about this." "Talk?" Mark laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "I don't think so." With a swift, powerful motion, Mark threw Tom against the wall. Tom crumpled to the floor, groaning. Emily screamed, scrambling off the bed to try and get between them. "Mark, stop, please!" Emily cried, tears streaming down her face. Mark looked at her, the woman he had loved for years, now a stranger. "How could you, Emily? How could you do this to us?" Emily sobbed, unable to find the words. The sight of her broken and crying didn't soften Mark's anger. Instead, it fueled it. He turned back to Tom, who was struggling to his feet. "I'm not done with you," Mark said, his voice icy. Tom raised his hands defensively. "Mark, I swear it was a mistake." "A mistake?" Mark lunged at him, his fists flying. He hit Tom once, twice, and a third time, each punch landing with a sickening thud. Tom's protests turned into groans of pain, and he fell back to the floor. "Mark, please!" Emily's voice was desperate now. "You're going to kill him!" Mark stopped, his chest heaving, his knuckles bloody. He looked at Tom, who was barely conscious, then at Emily. The realization of what he had done sank in, and he took a step back. "Get out," he said to Tom, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get out of my house and never come back." Tom didn't need to be told twice. He staggered to his feet, grabbed his clothes, and fled, leaving Mark and Emily alone in the wreckage of their bedroom. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive. Emily stood there, clutching the sheets to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Mark turned to her, his expression a mix of anger and heartbreak. "Why, Emily?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why did you do this?" Emily shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. I don't know, Mark. I didn't mean for it to happen." Mark laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean for it to happen? That's all you have to say?" "I made a mistake," Emily whispered. "A terrible mistake." Mark shook his head, the rage bubbling up again. "A mistake? You call this a mistake? You brought another man into our home, our bed." Emily sobbed harder, collapsing onto the bed. "I'm sorry, Mark. I don't know what else to say." "Sorry?" Mark's voice rose. "Sorry isn't enough, Emily. You destroyed everything." He turned away, unable to look at her any longer. He needed to get out, to clear his head before he did something he would truly regret. He grabbed his jacket and keys, ignoring Emily's pleas to stay and talk. "Mark, please! Don't leave like this!" she cried, reaching out to him. But Mark was already out the door, slamming it behind him. He got into his car, his hands shaking as he gripped the steering wheel. He needed to escape, to get away from the nightmare his life had become. He started the car and drove, not knowing where he was going, only that he had to get as far away as possible. As he drove, the reality of what had just happened hit him in waves. The betrayal, the rage, the sorrow. It was too much to process. He pulled into a liquor store parking lot, needing something to numb the pain. He bought a bottle of bourbon and sat in his car, drinking straight from the bottle, trying to drown out the images of Emily and Tom together. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Emily. He ignored it, letting it go to voicemail. She kept calling, sending text after text, but Mark couldn't bring himself to answer. Finally, after what felt like hours, he picked up the phone. "Hello," he said, his voice raw. "Mark, where are you?" Emily's voice was frantic. "Please come home so we can talk." "It's over, Emily," Mark said, his voice hollow. "There's nothing left to talk about." "Please, Mark, we need to get past this," she begged. "Get past this?" Mark laughed bitterly. "You mean get past you sleeping with another man in our bed? I don't think so." "Mark, I love you," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Love?" Mark shook his head. "You don't know what love is." He hung up, taking another swig from the bottle. He sat there alone in the parking lot, watching the world go by, feeling like his own life had come to a standstill. The next morning, Mark woke up with a pounding headache, the bourbon bottle empty beside him. He needed coffee and a bathroom. It was 7:30 a.m. He went into the nearby Walmart, bought a change of clothes, and cleaned up as best he could in the restroom. He didn't want to face the day, but he had no choice. When he arrived at his office, he found 37 messages, 20 emails, and 3 missed calls, all from Emily. His colleague, Dave, walked in, waving a hand in front of his nose. "What the hell, Mark? You smell like a distillery," Dave said. "Bad day yesterday. Worse night," Mark replied, rubbing his temples. "What's up, buddy? Trouble with Emily?" Dave asked, concern in his voice. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I came home early. She was in bed with Tom." Dave's eyes widened. "Oh crap, are you sure?" "Yeah, I saw them. I hit him hard," Mark admitted, showing his bruised knuckles. "Damn, Mark, what are you going to do?" Dave asked. "I don't know. I need to disappear for a while. Get away from everything," Mark said. "You can't just leave. We worked so hard to build this place," Dave argued. "I know, but I can't stay here, not right now. I'll keep working on the designs remotely," Mark said, already planning his escape. He gathered his things and left the office, stopping by the bank to set up a new account. He then headed to the marina, where his 33-foot yacht, the Freedom, was waiting. It was time to leave everything behind and find some semblance of peace on the open sea. As Mark approached his yacht, Freedom, he felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The boat had always been his sanctuary, a place where he could escape from the pressures of life. But now, it was a symbol of his retreat from the wreckage of his marriage. He climbed aboard and started preparing for the journey. He checked the fuel levels, stocked up on provisions, and plotted his course on the GPS. He planned to head south along the East Coast, making stops in Virginia Beach, Charleston, and Jacksonville before reaching Nassau. The thought of the journey ahead gave him something to focus on, a way to distract himself from the pain. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. He ignored it, knowing that nothing she could say would change what had happened. Instead, he turned off his phone and tossed it into a drawer. He needed to disconnect from everything and everyone. With the engines roaring to life, Mark felt a sense of liberation as he steered Freedom out of the marina. The open water stretched out before him, offering a promise of solitude and reflection. As he navigated through the Chesapeake Bay, he couldn't help but think back to the happier times he had shared with Emily. The memories came flooding back. Their first date, the way she laughed at his jokes, the look in her eyes when she said, "I do." It all seemed so distant now, like a lifetime ago. He had believed they were building a life together, but it was all a lie. The first night on the yacht was rough. Mark couldn't sleep, his mind replaying the events of the previous day over and over. He tried to drown it out with more bourbon, but the alcohol only dulled the edges of his pain. He sat on the deck, staring out at the dark water, wondering how he had ended up here. By morning, Mark decided to focus on the practicalities of the journey. He checked the weather forecast, made sure the autopilot was functioning correctly, and set his course for Virginia Beach. The routine tasks helped to keep his mind occupied, giving him a brief respite from his turmoil. As freedom cut through the waves, Mark allowed himself to think back to the early days of his relationship with Emily. He remembered their first meeting at a college party, the way she had looked at him with those sparkling blue eyes. They had talked for hours, finding a connection that felt like destiny. They had shared so many adventures, road trips, camping under the stars, lazy Sundays spent reading in bed. He had loved her deeply, more than he thought possible. And she had betrayed him in the worst way imaginable. The memories were bittersweet, a reminder of what he had lost, but they also gave him strength. He had been happy once, and maybe someday he could find that happiness again. The days at sea were long and lonely. Mark spent hours steering the yacht, listening to the hum of the engines and the rush of the water against the hull. He fished, cooked simple meals, and tried to keep himself busy. But at night, the loneliness crept in, and the doubts began to gnaw at him. What had gone wrong? Was it something he had done? Had he been too focused on work, too distant, too blind to see the signs? He replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment of their life together, searching for answers. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and pink, Mark spotted another boat in the distance. As it drew closer, he saw a woman standing on the deck, waving. She was about his age, with long blonde hair and a friendly smile. She shouted something, but the wind carried her words away. Curious and needing a distraction, Mark steered Freedom closer. The woman called out again, louder this time. "Hey there! Need some company?" Mark hesitated for a moment before responding. "Sure, why not?" The woman introduced herself as Laura. She was on a sailing trip with her parents, trying to find some peace after a difficult divorce. As they chatted, Mark found himself opening up about his own situation. There was something about Laura's easygoing nature that made it easy to talk to her. Laura invited Mark to join her and her parents for dinner on their boat. Hesitant at first, Mark agreed, realizing he needed the company. As they shared a meal, he felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. That night, back on his own yacht, Mark thought about Laura and her family. They had been through their own struggles, but they had found a way to keep going. It gave him a sense of comfort, knowing he wasn't alone in his pain. As he lay in his bunk, the gentle rocking of the boat lulling him to sleep, Mark made a promise to himself. He would get through this. He would find a way to move on, to rebuild his life, and maybe someday he would find love again. The first chapter of Mark's journey was filled with pain and betrayal, but it also held the promise of new beginnings. The open sea stretched out before him, and with it, the chance to start over. The next morning, Mark woke to the sound of waves gently lapping against the hull of Freedom. The early morning sun cast a warm glow over the deck, and for a brief moment, he felt a sense of peace. But the events of the previous days quickly resurfaced, and he was reminded of why he was here. Determined to put as much distance as possible between himself and the life he was leaving behind, Mark began the final preparations for his journey. He checked the fuel tanks, ensuring they were full, and double-checked his provisions. He had enough food and water to last him weeks, but he knew he would need to restock along the way. As he worked, his mind wandered back to the confrontation with Emily and Tom. The betrayal still stung, but he pushed the thoughts aside. There would be time to process everything later. For now, he needed to focus on the task at hand. He plotted his course carefully, deciding to make his first stop in Virginia Beach. From there, he would head south, with planned stops in Charleston, Jacksonville, and finally, Nassau. The open water stretched out before him, a blank canvas on which he could begin to rebuild his life. With everything in place, Mark untied the mooring lines and guided Freedom out of the marina. As the yacht picked up speed, he felt a sense of liberation. He was leaving behind the wreckage of his past and heading toward an uncertain but hopeful future. As the hours passed, Mark found himself lost in thought, the rhythmic hum of the engines providing a soothing backdrop. Memories of happier times with Emily flooded his mind. He remembered their wedding day, the way she had looked at him with such love and joy. He had believed they would grow old together, but that dream had been shattered. The flashbacks were bittersweet. He recalled their road trips, the laughter they shared, and the quiet moments of contentment. But interwoven with these memories were the arguments, the distance that had grown between them, and the feeling that something was missing. One memory stood out vividly. It was their anniversary, a few years back. Mark had planned a surprise getaway, renting a cabin in the mountains. They had spent the weekend hiking, cooking together, and reminiscing about their early days. It had been perfect, a brief return to the closeness they once shared. But looking back, Mark wondered if Emily had already begun to drift away even then. The first few days at sea were a mix of routine and reflection. Mark kept busy with the tasks of sailing, but the solitude also gave him plenty of time to think. At night, under the vast canopy of stars, he felt the weight of his emotions more acutely. He often found himself staring out at the horizon, grappling with questions that had no easy answers. Why had Emily strayed? Was it something he had done or failed to do? Could their marriage have been saved, or had it been doomed from the start? Despite the turmoil, there were moments of clarity. Mark realized that he had been neglecting his own happiness for too long, putting Emily's needs and their life together above everything else. He needed this time alone to rediscover who he was and what he wanted. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark decided to write a letter to Emily. He knew he might never send it, but he needed to get his thoughts down on paper. He wrote about their early days, the love they had shared, and the pain of her betrayal. He poured out his heart, hoping that by putting it into words, he could begin to heal. A few days into his journey, Mark spotted another boat on the horizon. As it drew closer, he recognized it as the same boat he had seen before. Laura stood on the deck, waving enthusiastically. Mark couldn't help but smile at her energy. He steered Freedom closer and called out, "Hello again, Laura." "Hi, Mark. How's the trip going?" Laura shouted back. "Could be better, could be worse," Mark replied with a shrug. Laura's boat pulled alongside his, and she threw him a line to secure the boats together. "Care for some company?" she asked, her smile warm and inviting. Mark hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, why not?" Laura invited Mark aboard her boat for dinner. Her parents, Frank and Alice, greeted him warmly. Frank was a seasoned sailor with a jovial demeanor, while Alice was a nurturing presence, always ready with a kind word or a hot meal. As they sat down to eat, the conversation flowed easily. Laura's family was curious about Mark's journey, and he found himself sharing more than he had intended. He told them about Emily, the betrayal, and his need to escape. Frank listened intently, nodding occasionally. "I've seen a lot of things in my years on the water," he said, "but nothing quite prepares you for something like that. You're doing the right thing, taking some time for yourself." Alice reached across the table and patted Mark's hand. "You're welcome to join us anytime, Mark. It's good to have friends out here." Laura smiled at him, her eyes full of empathy. "You're not alone, Mark. We're here for you." After dinner, Mark and Laura sat on the deck watching the stars. The gentle rocking of the boats and the soft murmur of the waves created a peaceful atmosphere. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, and their fears. Laura opened up about her own divorce, the pain of realizing that her marriage was over, and the struggle to move on. Mark found comfort in her words, knowing that she understood what he was going through. "Sometimes it feels like I'm drowning," Mark admitted, "like I'll never be able to move past this." Laura nodded. "I know that feeling, but you're stronger than you think, Mark. And being out here, on the water, it helps. It gives you space to breathe, to heal." Mark looked at her, gratitude filling his heart. "Thank you, Laura, for everything." "Any time," she replied, her smile lighting up the night. As the hours slipped away, Mark felt a sense of connection he hadn't experienced in a long time. Laura's presence was a balm to his wounded soul, and for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. Despite the growing sense of peace, Mark knew he couldn't avoid dealing with the reality of his situation forever. One morning, he turned on his phone to check his messages. There were dozens of missed calls and texts from Emily. Taking a deep breath, he decided to call her back. The phone rang a few times before Emily answered. "Mark, thank God, where are you? Are you okay?" Her voice was filled with concern. "I'm fine, Emily, I'm on the yacht heading south," Mark replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Please, Mark, come home. We can work this out," Emily pleaded. Mark's grip tightened on the phone. "Work this out? You think we can just move past what you did?" "I made a mistake, Mark. A terrible mistake, but I love you. We can get through this," Emily said, her voice breaking. Mark sighed, the anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "You brought another man into our bed, Emily. How do you expect me to forgive that?" "I don't know. I can't lose you," she whispered. Mark closed his eyes, the pain evident in his voice. "You've already lost me, Emily. I'm sorry, but I can't come back." He ended the call, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. The conversation had confirmed what he already knew. There was no going back. He needed to move forward, to find a new path. As he sat on the deck, watching the sun rise, Mark felt a sense of resolve. He would face the challenges ahead, but he would do it on his own terms. The open sea stretched out before him, full of possibilities. The second chapter of Mark's journey was a step toward healing. He had found companionship and understanding in Laura and her family, and he had taken the first steps toward letting go of the past. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The days blended into a routine as Mark continued his journey southward. He often found himself in the company of Laura and her parents. Their presence was a welcome distraction from his troubles, and he began to look forward to their shared meals and conversations. One afternoon, as Mark was performing some routine maintenance on Freedom, he heard a shout from Laura's boat. He looked up to see Frank waving him over. "Mark, could you give us a hand with something?" Frank called out. Mark secured his tools and made his way over to their boat. "Sure thing, Frank. What's going on?" "Our main sail's been giving us trouble. The damn thing won't stay up," Frank explained, scratching his head. "Think you could take a look?" Mark nodded and climbed aboard. He examined the sail and the rigging, quickly identifying the problem. "Your halyard's frayed. It needs replacing." Frank sighed. "I was afraid of that. Do you have any spare lines?" "I do," Mark replied. "Let me grab one from my boat." Mark fetched a spare halyard from Freedom and returned to help Frank install it. As they worked together, Frank shared stories of his own sailing adventures, the mishaps and triumphs that had defined his years on the water. Mark found himself laughing and enjoying the camaraderie. With the new halyard in place, they hoisted the main sail, and it held firm. Frank clapped Mark on the back, grinning from ear to ear. "You're a lifesaver, Mark. Thanks." "No problem, Frank. Glad to help," Mark said, feeling a sense of satisfaction. That evening, Laura invited Mark to join her for a walk along the beach. They strolled barefoot through the sand, the waves gently lapping at their feet. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the water. "I can't thank you enough for helping my dad today," Laura said, glancing at Mark with a smile. He was really frustrated with that sail. Mark shrugged. "It was nothing. Happy to help." Laura stopped and turned to face him. "It's more than that, Mark. You've been a real friend to us, and to me." Mark felt a warmth spread through him at her words. "You've all been so kind to me. I don't know how I would have managed without you." Laura reached out and took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You're stronger than you think, Mark, and you're not alone." They continued their walk, talking about their dreams and hopes for the future. Laura shared her desire to start a new life, to find her own path after the pain of her divorce. Mark listened, feeling a growing connection with her. As the night fell, they sat on a driftwood log, watching the stars appear one by one. The silence between them was comfortable, a shared understanding of the journey they were both on. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Laura asked softly. Mark nodded. "All the time. I know I need to move on to build a new life, but it's hard to see past the hurt right now." Laura rested her head on his shoulder. "We'll get there, Mark, one step at a time." Despite the solace he found in Laura's company, Mark couldn't escape the persistent calls and messages from Emily. One evening, as he sat on the deck of Freedom, his phone buzzed again. Reluctantly, he answered. "Mark, please, I need to talk to you." Emily's voice came through, pleading and desperate. "What is it, Emily?" Mark asked, trying to keep his tone even. "I can't stop thinking about what happened. I need to understand why you left," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. Mark took a deep breath. "You know why, Emily. You betrayed me. You broke our trust. I know, and I'm so sorry, but we had so many good years together. Doesn't that count for something?" she asked. "It does. But what you did, it changed everything," Mark replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Can't we try to fix it? Please, Mark. I love you," Emily begged. Mark closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "I can't, Emily. I need to move on, and so do you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Emily spoke again. "I understand, I wish things could have been different." "Me too," Mark said softly. "Goodbye, Emily." He ended the call and set the phone aside, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. He knew he had made the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. As Mark sailed closer to Charleston, he received an unexpected call from his lawyer, Mike. The news was not good. Tom had filed a lawsuit against him for the assault, and there would be a court hearing. "Mark, you need to prepare for this," Mike said. "We can argue self-defense, but it's going to be a tough battle." Mark felt a surge of anger. He's the one who should be in trouble, not me. He was in my house with my wife. "I know, but the law doesn't always work in our favor. We need to gather as much evidence as we can to support your case," Mike explained. Mark agreed to meet Mike in Charleston to discuss the case further. The thought of facing Tom in court made his blood boil, but he knew he had to deal with it. That night, he shared his frustrations with Laura. She listened patiently, offering her support. "You're doing the right thing by fighting this, Mark. You have to stand up for yourself," Laura said, her eyes filled with determination. "I just want this nightmare to end," Mark admitted. "It will. Just take it one step at a time," Laura said, squeezing his hand. The days leading up to the court hearing were filled with anxiety and tension. Mark tried to focus on his journey, but the looming confrontation with Tom weighed heavily on his mind. He found solace in Laura's company, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. She became his confidant, his anchor in the storm. One evening, as they sat on the deck of Freedom, Mark finally opened up about his deepest fears. "I'm scared, Laura. What if I lose the case? What if I can't move on from this?" he said, his voice trembling. Laura took his hand in hers, looking into his eyes. "You won't lose. And even if things don't go the way we hope, you'll find a way to move forward. You're stronger than you think, Mark." Her words gave him a glimmer of hope, and he held on to that as he prepared for the battle ahead. When Mark arrived in Charleston, he met with Mike to go over the details of the case. They spent hours discussing strategy, gathering evidence, and preparing for the hearing. Mike was confident but cautious. "We have a strong case, but we need to be prepared for anything." Mark nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. "I'll do whatever it takes, Mike." The day of the hearing arrived, and Mark felt a mix of nerves and determination. He entered the courtroom, ready to face Tom and fight for his future. As he sat down, he saw Tom across the room, smirking. The sight of him reignited Mark's anger, but he kept it in check. The hearing began, and both sides presented their arguments. Mike was relentless, questioning Tom's actions and painting a clear picture of the betrayal Mark had suffered. When it was Mark's turn to speak, he took a deep breath and addressed the court. "I loved my wife, and I trusted her. Finding her with Tom was the most painful moment of my life. I acted out of anger and hurt, but I didn't mean to cause serious harm. I just wanted to protect what was mine." The judge listened carefully, and after a tense silence, delivered the verdict. Mark was found not guilty of assault, but was ordered to pay a fine for the damages. Relief washed over him, and he thanked Mike for his hard work. As he left the courtroom, he felt a sense of closure. The battle was over, and he could finally begin to heal. Back on Freedom, Mark reflected on the journey so far. He had faced his demons, confronted the pain of betrayal, and emerged stronger. Laura joined him on the deck, a smile on her face. "You did it, Mark. It's over." He nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "I couldn't have done it without you, Laura." She leaned in and kissed him gently. "We're in this together, remember?" As they sailed south toward Jacksonville, Mark felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew he had the strength to face whatever came his way. The third chapter of Mark's journey was a turning point. He had built connections, faced his fears, and taken the first steps toward a new beginning. The open sea stretched out before him, full of possibilities and hope. The relief of winning the court case was short-lived. Just as Mark began to feel a sense of normalcy returning, he received a call from Mike with more bad news. "Mark, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Tom isn't giving up. He's pushing for a civil suit," Mike said, his tone grim. Mark rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar weight of stress settle on his shoulders. "What now, Mike?" "He claims the assault has caused him ongoing physical and emotional distress. He's looking for a substantial settlement," Mike explained. Mark clenched his jaw, anger bubbling up once more. "Of course he is. What's our move?" "We'll need to gather more evidence to show his claims are exaggerated. Witnesses, character statements, anything that can paint a different picture," Mike advised. Mark sighed, the fight far from over. "All right, I'll do whatever it takes. Let's get this done." Amid the legal battles, the calls from Emily continued. Each conversation was a reminder of the life Mark was trying to leave behind. One afternoon, as he anchored near a quiet beach, his phone rang again. "Mark, we need to talk," Emily's voice came through, insistent. "There's nothing left to say, Emily," Mark replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Please, Mark, I need to explain. I can't stand how we left things," she pleaded. Mark felt a pang of guilt but pushed it aside. "Explain what? That you chose to be with someone else?" "It wasn't like that," Emily insisted. "I was lonely, Mark. You were always away, and I made a mistake." Mark took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "We all make mistakes, Emily, but some mistakes can't be undone." "Can we at least try to find some closure?" she asked, her voice breaking. Mark closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words. "Fine, I'll meet you when I get back to shore, but this is the last time, Emily." The next day, Mark decided it was time to talk to his sons. He knew they deserved to hear his side of the story. He dialed Sam first. "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" Sam's voice was a welcome sound. "Hi, Sam, I've been better," Mark admitted. "I wanted to talk to you about everything that's been happening." "Mom's been calling me a lot. She's really upset," Sam said, concern in his voice. "I know, and I don't want to put you in the middle of this," Mark said, "but you need to know the truth. I came home early one day and found her with another man." There was a long silence on the other end. "I had no idea, Dad. I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault, Sam. I just wanted you to hear it from me," Mark said. They talked for a while longer, Mark answering Sam's questions and trying to reassure him that everything would eventually be okay. The conversation left Mark feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Next, he called Jack, his younger son. "Hey, Dad, what's up?" Jack answered, sounding upbeat. "Hey, Jack, I need to talk to you about something serious," Mark began. Jack listened as Mark explained the situation. "Wow, Dad, that's rough. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing. It's been tough, but I'm getting through it," Mark replied. "Well, if you need anything, just let me know. We're here for you," Jack said, his support evident. "Thanks, Jack. That means a lot," Mark said, feeling a bit lighter after the conversation. Mark's agreed meeting with Emily took place at a quiet cafe near the marina. As he walked in, he saw her sitting by the window looking worn and anxious. He took a deep breath and approached the table. "Hi, Emily," he said, sitting down opposite her. "Mark, thank you for meeting me," Emily said, her eyes filled with tears. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need to try to make things right." Mark sighed, the emotional fatigue evident on his face. Just tell me why, Emily. Why did you do it? Emily looked down, her hands trembling. I was lonely, Mark. You were always away for work, and I felt like you didn't care about us anymore. Tom was there, and I made a horrible mistake. Lonely? Mark's voice was tinged with bitterness. I was working hard to provide for us, to give us a good life, and you repay me by bringing another man into our home? Emily wiped her tears, her voice trembling. I know, and I'm so sorry. It wasn't about love or wanting to replace you. It was a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness that destroyed everything we built, Mark said, his anger rising. Do you know how that felt? To walk in and see you with him? Emily nodded, her tears flowing freely. I can't imagine the pain I caused you. But please, Mark, can we at least find a way to move forward, even if it's apart? Mark took a deep breath, his mind racing. I don't know, Emily. Right now, all I feel is anger and betrayal. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Finally, Mark stood up. I need time, Emily. Time to figure out where to go from here, he said, turning to leave. Emily reached out, her voice desperate. Please, Mark, don't shut me out completely. Mark paused, then nodded curtly. I'll think about it. Back on Freedom, Mark found himself restless. The confrontation with Emily had stirred up old wounds, and he needed a distraction. As he was preparing dinner, he heard a knock on the hull. Surprised, he went to investigate. Mark, it's Dave, came the familiar voice of his old friend and colleague. Mark's face broke into a smile. Dave, what are you doing here? Dave climbed aboard, a grin on his face. I heard about your adventure and thought I'd check in on you. Plus, I have some news. Mark offered him a beer, and they sat on the deck, catching up. Dave shared updates from the office and the latest projects they were working on. The conversation was a welcome distraction, a reminder of the life Mark had left behind. So, what's the news? Mark asked, curiosity piqued. Dave leaned forward, his expression serious. I might have a solution for your legal troubles. I know a guy who specializes in cases like yours. He's tough but fair. I think he could really help. Mark felt a flicker of hope. That sounds promising. Thanks, Dave. No problem, buddy. We're all rooting for you, Dave said, clapping him on the shoulder. The next morning, Mark called Mike to discuss Dave's suggestion. They arranged a meeting with the new lawyer, Tom Harding, a no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for winning difficult cases. Tom listened intently as Mark and Mike explained the situation. He asked pointed questions, taking detailed notes. All right, Mark, here's what we need to do, Tom said, leaning back in his chair. We need to gather character statements, evidence of Tom's behavior, and any documentation that can support your case. We're going to build a solid defense. Mark nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Let's do it. They spent the next few days working tirelessly, gathering evidence and preparing their strategy. Mark reached out to friends and colleagues asking for their support. The process was exhausting, but he knew it was necessary. The day of the civil suit arrived, and Mark felt a mix of nerves and resolve. He entered the courtroom with Mike and Tom by his side, ready to face whatever came. Tom was already there, looking smug. As the proceedings began, Tom Harding took control, presenting a compelling case. He highlighted Tom's history of manipulative behavior and the impact of the betrayal on Mark's life. When it was Mark's turn to testify, he spoke honestly about the pain and anger he had felt. He described the moment he found Emily and Tom together, the impact it had on his marriage, and his journey to find peace. The cross-examination was brutal, but Mark held his ground, refusing to be intimidated. Tom Harding's expertise shone through, countering every argument with calm precision. After hours of tense testimony, the judge called a recess. Mark sat in the hallway, his heart pounding. Laura appeared, her presence a calming influence. You're doing great, Mark. Stay strong, she whispered, squeezing his hand. When the judge returned, the courtroom fell silent. The verdict was delivered. Mark was not liable for the damages Tom claimed. The case was dismissed. Relief washed over Mark, and he thanked Tom Harding and Mike for their hard work. As he left the courtroom, he felt a sense of closure. The battle was over, and he could finally move forward. Back on freedom, Mark reflected on the journey so far. The legal battles, the confrontations with Emily, and the support from friends and family had all been part of his healing process. He felt a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Laura joined him on the deck, a smile on her face. "You did it, Mark. It's finally over." He nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thanks to you and everyone who stood by me." Laura leaned in and kissed him gently. "We're in this together, remember?" As they sailed toward their next destination, Mark felt a sense of peace. The open sea stretched out before them, full of possibilities and hope. The fourth chapter of Mark's journey was a testament to his resilience and the power of connection. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he knew he had the strength and support to face whatever came his way. With the legal battles behind him, Mark began to focus on his future. He knew he couldn't live on the yacht forever and needed to rebuild his life on solid ground. One evening, as he and Laura sat on the deck, he shared his thoughts. "I can't stay out here indefinitely, Laura. I need to start thinking about what's next," Mark said, looking out at the horizon. Laura nodded, understanding in her eyes. "What are you thinking of doing?" "I need to find a place to settle down, maybe get back into work. But I want it to be different this time. I don't want to be consumed by it," Mark explained. "That sounds like a good plan. Have you thought about where you want to go?" Laura asked. "Not exactly. Somewhere peaceful, near the water. I was thinking of looking into some coastal towns," Mark said. Laura smiled. "I've always loved Savannah. It's beautiful, historic, and right by the water." Mark's eyes lit up. "Savannah, huh? That sounds perfect. Let's plan a trip." Despite his decision to move forward, Mark couldn't completely avoid his past. Emily continued to reach out, desperate for reconciliation. One afternoon, as Mark and Laura were preparing to leave for Savannah, his phone rang. It was Emily. "Mark, please, I need to see you." Emily's voice was urgent. "We've talked about this, Emily. There's nothing left to say," Mark replied, trying to keep his frustration in check. "I just want one last chance to explain," Emily pleaded. Mark sighed, glancing at Laura, who nodded in support. "Fine, Emily. We'll meet, but this is the last time." They arranged to meet at a cafe in Savannah, a neutral ground. As Mark and Laura arrived, they saw Emily waiting at a corner table, looking anxious. "Mark, thank you for coming," Emily said, standing up as they approached. "Let's get this over with," Mark said, sitting down. Laura sat beside him, a silent pillar of support. Emily took a deep breath. "I know I've caused you a lot of pain, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand that I never stopped loving you." Mark's jaw tightened. "If you loved me, Emily, you wouldn't have done what you did." "I know. I was selfish and stupid. I thought I was missing something in our marriage, but it was all in my head," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "You shattered my trust, Emily. That's not something that can be easily repaired," Mark said, his voice cold. "I understand that now. I just wanted to ask for your forgiveness, even if we can't be together," Emily said, her voice breaking. Mark looked at her, the woman he had once loved so deeply. He felt a mix of anger, sadness, and pity. "Forgiveness isn't something I can give right now. Maybe someday, but not now." Emily nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. Thank you for hearing me out." Mark stood up, taking Laura's hand. "Goodbye, Emily." As they left the cafe, Mark felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Emily was finally coming to an end. Mark and Laura spent the next few days exploring Savannah. The city's charm and beauty captivated them both. They wandered through historic streets, visited museums, and enjoyed the local cuisine. The more they saw, the more Mark felt at home. One afternoon, as they sat by the river, Mark turned to Laura. "This feels right. I think this is where I want to start over." Laura smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I was hoping you'd say that. Savannah feels like a new beginning." They spent the next few days looking at potential homes. Mark wanted a place that was peaceful but not too far from the city. They found a charming house near the water, surrounded by trees and gardens. It felt like the perfect place to start anew. Mark decided to re-establish his architectural practice, but this time he wanted to focus on sustainable and community-oriented projects. He reached out to old colleagues and began networking with local firms. Laura, who had a background in environmental science, decided to join him in the venture. They envisioned a practice that not only designed beautiful buildings, but also contributed positively to the environment and the community. Their first project was a community center in a struggling neighborhood. Mark and Laura poured their hearts into the project, working closely with local residents to ensure it met their needs. One evening, as they reviewed the plans, Mark looked at Laura, gratitude filling his heart. "I couldn't have done this without you, Laura. You've been my rock." Laura smiled, squeezing his hand. "We're a team, Mark. Always." One morning, as Mark and Laura were finalizing the community center plans, there was a knock on the door. Mark opened it to find an old friend from his college days, Eric. "Eric! What a surprise!" Mark exclaimed, embracing his friend. "Hey, Mark, I heard about everything you've been through and wanted to check in on you," Eric said, a concerned look on his face. Mark invited Eric in, and they caught up over coffee. Eric shared news about mutual friends and their lives, and Mark filled him in on his journey and new beginnings. "I'm glad to see you're doing well, Mark, and this community center project sounds amazing," Eric said, genuinely impressed. "It feels good to be doing something meaningful," Mark said. "How about you? What brings you to Savannah?" "I was thinking of relocating. My job allows me to work remotely, and I needed a change of scenery," Eric explained. Mark's eyes lit up. "You should stay here. There's plenty of room, and we'd love to have you around." Eric smiled. "I might just take you up on that offer." As the weeks passed, Mark and Laura settled into their new life in Savannah. Their architectural practice began to thrive, and the community center project brought them closer to the residents. One evening, as they attended a community meeting to present the final plans, Mark felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led him to this moment. As they left the meeting hand in hand, Laura looked at him with pride. "You've come a long way, Mark." "So have you," Mark replied, pulling her close. To celebrate the completion of their first project, Mark and Laura hosted a small gathering at their new home. Friends, colleagues, and members of the community came together to celebrate the achievement. As they mingled with their guests, Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude. The love and support he had received from Laura, his friends, and the community had been instrumental in his healing journey. Toward the end of the evening, Mark stood up to give a toast. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This project is just the beginning. Laura and I are committed to making a positive impact in this community, and we couldn't do it without your support. Here's to new beginnings and a brighter future." The room erupted in applause, and Mark felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. The future was bright, and he was ready to embrace it. The fifth chapter of Mark's journey was marked by growth, new beginnings, and the strength of community. With Laura by his side, he had found a new purpose and a new home. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he faced it with hope and determination. With the community center project behind him, Mark felt more grounded than he had in months. However, the specter of the ongoing legal battles with Tom still loomed large. Despite the positive outcome of the criminal trial, Tom's civil suit continued to be a thorn in Mark's side. As the date for the civil trial approached, Mark prepared himself for what he hoped would be the final confrontation. The courtroom was tense as both sides prepared their arguments. Tom's lawyer presented him as a victim of a vicious assault, claiming lasting physical and emotional damage. Mark's lawyer, Tom Harding, countered by highlighting the context of the incident and the betrayal that had provoked it. "Mr. Davidson," Harding began, addressing Tom, "is it not true that you were engaged in an intimate act with Mrs. Baker in her marital bed when Mr. Baker returned home unexpectedly?" Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Yes, but—" "And is it not also true that you had been pursuing a relationship with Mrs. Baker for some time prior to that incident?" Harding pressed. "Yes," Tom admitted reluctantly. Harding turned to the judge. Your Honor, my client acted in a moment of extreme emotional distress upon discovering the infidelity of his wife and the betrayal of a man he considered a friend. While we do not condone his actions, they were understandable given the circumstances. The judge nodded, considering Harding's words. The testimony continued, with Mark taking the stand to share his side of the story. He spoke candidly about the pain and betrayal he had felt, and his attempts to move on from the incident. When it was Tom's turn to testify, his demeanor was arrogant and unrepentant. He portrayed himself as a victim, seeking sympathy from the court. But Harding's cross-examination was relentless, dismantling Tom's credibility piece by piece. In the end, the judge delivered a balanced verdict. Mark was ordered to pay a modest sum in damages, significantly less than what Tom had sought. The judge acknowledged the emotional turmoil that had led to the incident and emphasized that the amount was more symbolic than punitive. As Mark left the courtroom, he felt a sense of closure. The legal battles were finally behind him, and he could focus on rebuilding his life without the constant shadow of litigation. Despite the conclusion of the legal drama, Emily continued to reach out to Mark, desperate to find a way back into his life. One evening, as Mark and Laura were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, his phone rang. It was Emily. "Mark, please, can we talk?" Emily's voice was pleading. Mark sighed, exchanging a look with Laura. "Emily, we've been through this. There's nothing left to say. Just one last chance, Mark, please. I need to see you face to face," she insisted. Reluctantly, Mark agreed to meet her one final time. They arranged to meet at a quiet park near the river. As Mark arrived, he saw Emily sitting on a bench, looking anxious and worn. "Thank you for coming," Emily said as Mark sat down beside her. "Emily, this is it. Whatever you have to say it now," Mark replied, his tone firm. Emily took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. "I know I hurt you more than I can ever make up for. I betrayed your trust in the worst possible way, but I can't let go of the hope that we might still have a future together." Mark shook his head, the pain still fresh. "You shattered everything we built, Emily. There's no going back from that. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I did what I did. I know it doesn't change anything, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry," Emily said, her voice breaking. Mark looked at her, the woman he had once loved so deeply, now a stranger. "I believe you're sorry, Emily, but that doesn't change what happened. I need to move on, and so do you." Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'll always love you, Mark." Mark stood up, feeling a sense of finality. "Goodbye, Emily. I hope you find peace." As he walked away, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The chapter with Emily was truly closed, and he could focus on his future with Laura. With the legal battles and his past behind him, Mark turned his attention fully to his future. He and Laura continued to grow their architectural practice, focusing on projects that made a positive impact on the community. One day, as they reviewed plans for a new eco-friendly housing development, Mark received a call from an old friend, Dave. "Mark, how are things in Savannah?" Dave asked cheerfully. "Great, Dave. We're working on some exciting projects here," Mark replied, smiling. "Listen, I have a proposition for you. There's a big project coming up in Miami, and I think you'd be perfect for it." "Interested?" Dave said. Mark's interest was piqued. "Tell me more." Dave explained the details of the project, a large-scale urban renewal initiative aimed at revitalizing a neglected neighborhood. It was exactly the kind of work Mark had always dreamed of doing. "I'll discuss it with Laura, but it sounds like a fantastic opportunity," Mark said. After he hung up, Mark turned to Laura. "What do you think about expanding our practice to Miami?" Laura's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing. We've built a strong foundation here, and this could be the next big step." They spent the evening discussing the logistics and potential challenges, but the excitement was palpable. The opportunity in Miami represented not just professional growth, but also a chance to start a new chapter in their lives. Before they could fully commit to the Miami project, there were still a few loose ends to tie up in Savannah. Mark and Laura worked tirelessly to ensure the community center was fully operational and left in capable hands. They trained a local team to manage the center and organized a final community event to celebrate its success. At the event, Mark stood before the gathered crowd, feeling a deep sense of pride and fulfillment. This community center represents the strength and resilience of this neighborhood. It's been an honor to work with all of you, and I know that together, you'll continue to make this place thrive. The crowd erupted in applause, and Mark felt a sense of closure. His work in Savannah was done, and it was time to embrace the future. The day of their departure was bittersweet. Mark and Laura had grown to love Savannah and the people they had met, but the excitement of a new adventure awaited them. As they prepared to leave, Eric, who had decided to stay in Savannah, came to see them off. "I'll miss you guys, but I know you're going to do amazing things in Miami," he said, hugging them both. "We'll miss you too, Eric. Stay in touch," Laura said, her voice tinged with emotion. With everything packed and ready, Mark and Laura took one last look at their home in Savannah. It had been a place of healing and new beginnings, and they would always cherish their time there. Arriving in Miami, Mark and Laura were struck by the vibrant energy of the city. They quickly settled into their new home and began work on the urban renewal project. The scale and scope of the project were challenging, but it was exactly the kind of work they were passionate about. They collaborated with local architects, community leaders, and residents, ensuring that the project was inclusive and beneficial for everyone involved. The work was demanding, but it was also incredibly rewarding. One evening, as they reviewed plans in their new office, Mark looked at Laura with a smile. "I can't believe how far we've come, from the darkest days to building a new life together." Laura nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "We've faced so many challenges, but we've always come out stronger. I wouldn't want to do this with anyone else." As the months passed, the Miami project began to take shape. The once neglected neighborhood was transformed into a thriving community, with new housing, green spaces, and community centers. Mark and Laura's reputation grew, and they were sought after for other high-profile projects. They remained committed to their vision of sustainable, community-oriented architecture, and their work continued to make a positive impact. One afternoon, as they walked through the completed neighborhood, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "We've built something amazing, Laura. Not just buildings, but a legacy." Laura smiled, taking his hand, "And we're just getting started." The 6th chapter of Mark's journey was a testament to resilience, love, and the power of new beginnings. With Laura by his side, he had faced his past, embraced the present, and built a future full of promise and hope. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but together, they were ready to face whatever came their way. Settling into their new life in Miami, Mark and Laura threw themselves into their work. The urban renewal project was a resounding success, and they quickly became known for their innovative and community-focused designs. Their firm, Baker & Green, gained a reputation for excellence and integrity. One morning, Mark received a call from an old colleague, Bob, who had followed his journey from afar. "Mark, it's great to hear about all the amazing work you're doing in Miami," Bob said, his voice full of admiration. "Thanks, Bob. It's been a whirlwind, but it's incredibly rewarding," Mark replied, smiling. "We've got a new project coming up here in New York, and we could really use your expertise. What do you say? Ready for a collaboration?" Bob asked. Mark looked at Laura, who was listening in. She nodded encouragingly. "Sure, Bob. Let's make it happen. Send me the details, and we'll get started." The New York project presented new challenges and opportunities. It was a large-scale mixed-use development that required careful planning and innovative solutions. Mark and Laura assembled a talented team and began working on the design. As they delved into the project, they encountered unexpected obstacles, from zoning issues to community opposition. Mark felt the pressure mounting, but he was determined to see the project through. One evening, as they reviewed plans late into the night, Laura noticed the strain on Mark's face. "Mark, you need to take a break. You're pushing yourself too hard." Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but this project is so important. I can't afford to drop the ball." Laura placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch soothing. "We'll get through this together. Remember, we're a team. Amidst the chaos of the project, Mark received a call from his son, Sam. "Dad, I have some exciting news," Sam said, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "What's up, Sam?" Mark asked, curious. "I got a promotion at work and I'm getting married. We want you to come to the wedding," Sam announced. Mark felt a surge of pride and happiness. "That's fantastic news, Sam. I'm so proud of you. Of course, I'll be there." As the wedding approached, Mark and Laura took a break from their hectic schedules to travel to the event. The wedding was a joyous occasion filled with love and laughter. Mark reconnected with his family, feeling a renewed sense of belonging and happiness. Back in Miami, the time had come for the grand opening of the Urban Renewal Project. The community buzzed with excitement as the date approached. Mark and Laura had poured their hearts into this project, and it was finally time to see the fruits of their labor. The opening ceremony was a grand affair, attended by local officials, residents, and media. Mark stood at the podium feeling a mix of nerves and pride. "Thank you all for being here today," Mark began, his voice steady. "This project has been a labor of love, a testament to what we can achieve when we come together as a community. It's not just about buildings, it's about creating a place where people can thrive." The crowd erupted in applause, and Mark felt a swell of emotion. Laura joined him on stage and they cut the ribbon together, officially opening the new development. As they walked through the revitalized neighborhood, Mark felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found a new purpose and a new beginning, and he was ready for whatever the future held. To celebrate the success of the Miami project and the upcoming collaboration in New York, Mark and Laura hosted a party at their home. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered to share in the joy of their accomplishments. Eric, who had moved to Miami to join their firm, raised a toast. "To Mark and Laura, whose vision and dedication have transformed lives and communities, here's to many more successes." The room echoed with cheers and clinking glasses. Mark looked around, feeling grateful for the support and love that surrounded him. After the guests had left, Mark and Laura sat on their porch, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "We've come a long way," Mark said, his voice full of emotion. Laura nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "And we still have so much more to achieve. I'm excited for the future, Mark." Mark kissed her forehead, feeling a profound sense of contentment. "Me too, Laura. Me too." In the quiet moments that followed, Mark took time to reflect on his journey. From the depths of betrayal and despair, he had risen to build a new life filled with love, purpose, and hope. He thought about the people who had supported him along the way, his friends, his family, and most importantly, Laura. Their love and partnership had been his anchor, guiding him through the storm. As he looked out at the Miami skyline, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced his past, embraced his present, and was ready for the future. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but with Laura by his side, he knew they could overcome anything. The collaboration with Bob in New York marked the beginning of a new chapter for Baker and Green. The project was ambitious and demanding, but it also offered incredible opportunities for growth and innovation. Mark and Laura split their time between Miami and New York, balancing their professional and personal lives with grace and determination. Their partnership flourished, and their firm continued to gain recognition for its excellence and integrity. One evening, as they watched the sunset from their New York apartment, Mark turned to Laura. "We've built something incredible, Laura, and we're just getting started." Laura smiled, her eyes full of love and pride. "I can't wait to see what the future holds, Mark. Together, we can achieve anything." The 7th chapter of Mark's journey was a celebration of new beginnings, love, and the power of resilience. He had transformed his life and found a new purpose, surrounded by the people he loved. The future was bright, and he was ready to embrace it with open arms.